Steve was my big brother. We were pals. I loved him. I adored him. We were very close. One of my first memories of Steve that just stands out was when he was just a little boy. I want to say he was 5. He picked up my dad's saw and he sawed through a post on our porch. My mom caught him, and she came out and she said, "Stephen, what are you doing? What are you doing? You can't saw down the house. What are you going to tell your father? Oh, what will your father say? What are you going to say to your father?" And Steve's answer was, "I'll tell him the truth, Mom." So that was, of course, the perfect answer. He didn't get into any trouble at all. Later, I want to say we were about 7, and I was 7, and he was probably about 9. We were swimming at the Hayward Plunge. Back then, my mom could pay a quarter for each of us, and we could spend the whole afternoon swimming. So that's what we were doing. Anyway, I got into a little accident jumping off the wall, hit my chin, and there was blood everywhere. So I immediately knew I had to find Steve, and my big brother would know what to do. And sure enough, he did. He remained calm under this emergency situation and took me over to the desk so I can get a Band-Aid, and then he walked with me to our aunt's house, and she took it from there. But I just remember feeling so comforted that, he knew what to do. And of course, he came to my rescue. He was my hero. He was my hero several times after that, too. Anyway, Steve from an early age had a strong work ethic. He liked to have lemonade stands to make money, and then he also had a couple different paper routes. And I always thought it was so kind and generous of him, because with his very first paycheck, he bought Sue and I a little gift. Well, that was so sweet. It just stood out for me. Later, when he was a little older in middle school, he served on this Civil Air Patrol, which I'm sure was a stepping stone for him, so far as leading to an interest in having a career in the Air Force. And he was quite accomplished in that. And as probably middle school age kid, he's developed an interest in history. And I remember him collecting books about World War II and, particularly military history. But he liked to read about those things. I just, I thought he was so smart, and it was kind of cool how he had these interests. He was kind of an old soul from the beginning. He just had this fondness for old-fashioned things. I love him. I miss him. Anyway, that's me and my brother. Thanks.
My earliest memory of Steve as a teenager was when he was 13 years old and I was 8 years old. He was a big Elvis Presley fan and had a lot of the albums. And the night that Elvis died, I just recall he and I sitting on the street curb listening from a transistor radio as the DJ played Elvis songs in memory. That would have been when we were living in Fresno, California. And it was also during that time that Steve began participating in the Civil Air Patrol, which was a youth development program associated with the Air Force. It definitely influenced him on his desire to join the Air Force, and frankly, I can't remember a time when he didn't have that interest. He continued to participate in the Silver Air Patrol when we moved to Lompoc and even had more of a leadership role. He even participated in the Lompoc Flower Festival parade as their color guard marched, and I do recall Steve holding the flag during that parade proudly. They even won an award during that participation. When we first moved to Lompoc, we didn't have any friends. It was the summertime, and so Steve and Mavis and I palled around together a lot that summer, watching Twilight Zone marathon, Mavis baking banana and zucchini bread, and we were playing volleyball in the backyard. But it was really just a bouncy ball that we used, bounced over the clothesline. But it afforded us a lot of fun. And it was about that time that we started to call Steve Bubs, just a term of endearment. Mavis and I, and even our parents, called him Bubs. And even recently, I was still calling him Bubs on occasion. Mavis and Steve went to high school together. She was a freshman when he was a junior, and he was already driving, so they drove into school together. Mavis says he'd even take her out to lunch pretty regularly, or bring her home for lunch so they could have lunch with our mom and watch the Andy Griffith Show at lunchtime. So he was a pretty sweet big brother, even though when they got back to high school, he wasn't necessarily hanging out with his freshman sister. One time we went camping, and he came home early, and he did so that he could clean the kitchen from top to bottom and surprise my mom when she came home, which was really welcome. In those high school years, Steve had a lot of great friends over the house, and his son Jimmy is actually named after his best friend Jimmy Sands, who I know that they joined the Air Force together and had a lot of great memories together. He was just a really sweet brother, a great son, and a good friend, and we miss him terribly, and we'll love him forever.
One of the earliest memories I have of my dad was when I was about 6 or 7 years old. We were living in Germany, and Jimmy and I were in the front yard playing. I was in like t-shirts and a short because it was a nice hot day, and my dad pulled into the driveway coming home from work. I remember being so excited. Me and Jimmy were like jumping up and down, yelling, "Dad! Dad!" I'm just waiting for him to get out of the car. He was grabbing his things out of the car. And all of a sudden, my behavior went from jumping up and down with joy to screaming and crying of pain. And my dad picked me up and carried me inside real quick. And we discovered that I had my first bee sting. This bee flew up my shorts and stung me right in the groin area. But I just remember him being so worried and cradling me into the house. A lot of his behavior was, he was very concerned about my well-being and my choices and just making good life choices and making sure I'm safe all the time. He was a good dad. And he really became a good friend in my adult life, too.
My dad and I definitely shared the fascination of motorcycles together. I remember when I was a kid, we were in Germany. I was probably 5 years old, and I would be dressed up in full leathers, sitting on the back of his motorcycle, riding through Germany. And I had to hold on to this dog toy around his waist because my arms weren't actually long enough to reach all the way around. And I remember my mom saying at one point I even fell asleep on the back of his motorcycle, and I had to be woken up by the time we finally got to the destination, which seems kind of dangerous looking back at it. Even growing up, we still shared that connection. He even put me in a couple of dirt bike courses just to kind of hone my skills leading up to the eventual me getting my motorcycle endorsement on my driver's license. He got me my first motorcycle, which is a 1986 SV750, which was his first bike back in the day. We used to ride through Texas, North Richland Hills, in an area that he called the lifestyles of the rich and the famous, because they were just full of very nice houses. We got to a stretch of interstate where there were no cars around, and I think I was maybe 16 at the time. He looked around, saw that there were no cars on the road. He was leading on his motorcycle. He signaled to me with his arm to kind of speed up, and then he just took off. And that was the first time I ever broke 100 miles per hour following him down the interstate. A couple years ago, we ended up taking a motorcycle trip together through the Ozarks, and most of the time it was raining. We got downpoured on. We were soaking wet going through, but it was still a very beautiful ride and a lot of fun just sharing motorcycle riding together when we didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to because of my military career moving in and out. And now I have his Harley motorcycle to carry on those trips.